elementary school, I tried to write a book. I tried it many times, and it would become a lifelong pursuit. In first grade, I wrote about a girl trapped in a tower. I gave up after the first chapter. In third grade, my dad let me borrow his computer for the first time, and that's when I really decided to sit down and get serious. This time, I was working on a series called Fairy Island, and it was about some kids who traveled to an island with, you guessed it, fairies, but also glittery waterfalls and a hot pink limousine. I gave up after the first chapter. In fourth and fifth grade, there would be several more attempts, none of which made an impression, all of which failed after 2 or 3 chapters. It's not that I wanted to give up so easily, but I just lost interest in the story. Sometimes I had no direction after that first chapter. Sometimes I forgot I was working on that story. And other times I just didn't like the idea anymore. I only wrote spontaneously when I had the motivation to do so, but that motivation was fleeting. To me, writing is breathing. It is something I've always done and something that I'll always have to do. My first dream as a child was to be an author. My teachers told me that they'd buy my books someday. And yet most of my projects, no matter how big or small, remained unfinished. I've never even written a successful short story until 9th grade. Meet my friend, writer's block. For you, it might be artist block, or creative block, or simply a lack of inspiration, falling into a slump. Whatever your passion is, we're all familiar with this decline of motivation or performance. But to me, writing is like breathing, and when I'm not writing, I'm suffocating. The first time my constant flow of storytelling really came to an end was in 3rd grade, when I learned for the first time that writing was not a realistic career goal. People told me, oh, everyone wants to be famous, everyone wants to be able to make a living off of art, but it's only the top 1% of the 1% of the 1% that will ever make it big. What makes you think you'll be any different? Though I was merely a child, my dreams were crushed by expectations of adult society. And so I focused on my times tables, and I gloated when I was the best at math in my class. In middle school, my eyes were open to a completely new level of competition and pressure. I was still writing, but not frequently, because writing was only a hobby, and what I learned in middle school is that there's no time for hobbies, no time for fun. If you want to make it in the world, you have to grind. From the beginning of 6th grade, my classmates were talking about what AP classes they would take in high school and what colleges they wanted to go to. I listened in on their conversations, and soon I was feeling bad for getting anything below 100. And of course, if I wasn't on track to take calculus by freshman year, then surely I would never succeed in life. So I took accelerated math frantically to catch up with my peers. And still, it never felt like enough, because everywhere I turned, there were still so many people who seemed like they were way better than me. The worst part was when I poured in all my time and energy and I still didn't see the results that I wanted. Was there something wrong with me? Was I worthless? Would I never get into college? Would I never succeed? Then I got a B for the first time in summer pre-calculus. Having been told that math was the key to my future for years, this B didn't tell me that I was trying and struggling in a hard class. This B told me that the world didn't need me. I floated into freshman year with this mindset, ready to try out for Science Olympiad, a moment I'd been waiting for since 6th grade when I hadn't made the team in middle school. But did I really care at that point? Whatever I was doing was automatic, the only thing I knew how to do, the only thing that I knew I could do. You know, it was the basic Asian student starter pack, AP Calculus, AVBC, both bio and chem, Key Club, speech and debate, on track to take 6 APs by sophomore year. You get the point. But one day, I was hanging out with my friends when a cool breeze swept over me. I turned my head towards the clear sky, and I realized that I wanted more out of life than what I thought mattered for the past 5 years. I didn't really want to be in Science Olympiad after all. And I didn't want to spend the rest of my life at my desk cramming information about things I had no passion for into my head. I wanted human connection and laughter and stories, and of course I wanted to be happy. However, just because I realized that I wasn't satisfied didn't mean that I knew exactly what I wanted. For the past few years, I'd been content in my discontent, and I accepted that what was the best for me was what everyone else said was the best for me. I would have been happy following the crowd for the rest of my life. Now I knew I wanted more, but what was that more that I wanted? All I could see was that my grades weren't on par with my peers. I didn't have any strengths in instruments or sports, and I wasn't winning any awards. Just as I was discovering that I wanted human connection, I began to feel ostracized in my friend group, and I wondered if they cared about me at all. My phone screen time hit an all-time high as I turned to scrolling away on social media to distract myself from the emptiness in my life. It felt like the world was reinforcing my self-doubt. After all, I'd been raised to believe that you're only worthy if you can contribute something intellectual to the world, and not just because you're a living, breathing, complex human. But then March 14th, 2020 happened. The pandemic hit, and collectively we all fell apart. Those first 2 weeks, I'd been happy to hear that school had been canceled. I didn't know how long we would be out, how long the pandemic would last, and all the unknowns that it would bring, a never-ending stream of bad news. At that time, I was just happy that I could finally take a break from the burnout and the sadness that had become my life. But 2 weeks passed, and the world didn't get better. In fact, it seemed to have been getting worse. As time went on, we were getting ready to transition to virtual learning for the rest of the school year and for the next school year. And it hit me that the world isn't under my control. The only thing under my control is myself at this present moment. So I decided to try and create a consistent routine. Exercising every day. I learned how to meditate, and I even try to listen to my parents and sleep earlier. But most importantly, I started writing again. I wrote through the summer, and soon I had completed a draft of a novel. My first ever complete draft of writing. It wasn't my first, my last, or my best idea for a novel, but it was the first one to become more than an idea. The next school year began, and I continued to write, and by December I had another draft. By the end of sophomore year, I had written 3 drafts of my novel, 3 novellas, and countless short stories and flash fiction pieces. For the first time in my life, I was writing consistently. No matter how I felt, I wrote 1,000 words a day, and even though most of them were awful, I got words on the page, and that was something. Because instead of waiting for the perfect moment, for the perfect words that would really never come, I managed to create something anyway, and I rediscovered my first love. But that doesn't mean that every word I write is perfect, or that the words always come to my brain. And when they don't, when I feel incapable of producing anything that I'm satisfied with, I allow my writer's block to define myself. Too long I had delayed my passion. Too long I had felt inadequate, like I had nothing. And now that I had something, I clung onto it so desperately, molding it into my entire identity, into my entire being. In a way, I was overcompensating for choosing what I love over stability, over security, over money. I was trying to prove that I was worthy of having a career outside of STEM. But this identity I created was teetering at the top of a Jenga tower, just waiting to collapse. If I can't even do the thing that I love, then What am I good for? For the first time in my life, I was being told that I was good at something, and I knew that if I ever lost that hold, I would only return to what I'd been before, nothing. I loved writing, but it became a sweet, deadly poison. Too often I was doing it just to prove that I belonged somewhere, to prove that I wasn't another blip in the universe. But this is ridiculous. To me, writing is breathing. We do not concern ourselves with perfect breaths. It is involuntary. I can't expect perfection of myself in writing or anything else because I'm human. We are all human. And one of the most fundamental parts about being a human is messing up, falling apart, and then pulling ourselves back together, becoming bigger than we once were. Too often we try to be perfect and we suck the joy out of doing things. Then we naturally perform worse. Our unrealistic, unattainable pressures begin to wear us away, and when we fail to meet those impossible goals, the cycle is reinforced. But do not fear imperfection. Just because we fail one day doesn't mean we aren't getting better while doing it, and that we aren't going to look back a year later and marvel at how far we've come. As Viktor Frankl said, success, like happiness, cannot be pursued. It must ensue, and it only does so as the unintended side effect of one's personal dedication to a cause greater than oneself. When we focus on the result more than the process, we lose sight of the passions, the intentions, and the joys we once had. We forget why we started in the first place. Our school system puts so much emphasis on the grades, the GPA, the tests, numerical values, to the point where students feel defined by those numbers, and they resort to cheating on tests, cramming nights before, for the sole purpose of earning a number and not to actually learn and retain information. Why is this? Why has our relationship with something as important as education become so toxic? Before the pandemic, I too was motivated by those results, and I only cared about them. But being stuck in my house all day long, I realized good grades and awards weren't enough to keep my mental health afloat. It wasn't those things, after all, that made me happy. It was the small, everyday things like watching the sunrise, listening to my favorite music, sharing a meal with my family, reading a good book under the warm sun, blooming flowers in spring, laughing until my stomach hurts, writing a story I believe in, and hearing the words of affirmation from my loved ones who believe in me even when I myself do not. These things give me energy to keep going when I can't even find the motivation to get out of bed in the morning. These are the things that keep me going, that keep us going. Only when the big things were taken away from me did I realize the importance of these small things, and I've become so much more grateful for my everyday life. It's okay to slow down. Allow yourself to be intentional because external validation is not sustainable. Let's put care into things. Let's be motivated by joy and genuine excitement, not just the desire to win. Many people have tried to write a book in elementary school, just like I did, but most people don't end up writing a book in their lives. Writing a book takes so much more than just the desire to become a published author. It takes hours, days, months, years of hard work. And at that point, it takes love and dedication to get to the finish line. It takes persistence and courage and discipline. At the end of the day, I write because to me, writing is as natural as breathing. Sometimes I get so caught up in trying to be good enough to succeed in this world. But the reason I write is not to make money or to flaunt about it on my resume. If I only wrote for the sole purpose of getting published, I probably wouldn't be struggling so much to actually get published. Fundamentally, I write because to me, writing is what makes me happy, and there are stories in me that beg to be told. I want to write the stories that I wish I could have read when I was growing up, the stories that I needed. And I only hope that one day people will be able to pick up my books and see themselves in it or learn something new about the world. It makes me so happy when I'm writing. And it sounds silly, it sounds obvious, but it took me 15 years to learn that writer's block is something I'll never overcome. But if I show up, if I write anyway, it makes all the difference, and eventually I'll find a rhythm. In the early days of the pandemic, I wrote a poem. It's not a very good poem, but I'd like to end today by sharing part of this poem with you. Trapped in a state of oblivion, my dark, empty room has held me hostage through 4 seasons' metamorphosis. Nearly drowning in my tears, I turn my head just in time to hear the solid click. I'm not mistaken. Spring, summer, fall, winter in a day. But when I step foot outside, it is spring again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brooke. That was incredible, and that closes out all of our speakers for the night. Let us give one more huge round of applause to our speakers. They did such a good job. I'd also like to thank all of you in the audience for coming out tonight and supporting what we have done, what we have put together. And of course, I'd like to extend my thanks to the entire team of TEDxEnlo who have put together this event with such dedication. It wouldn't have been possible without them, and I'm so thankful for this opportunity. Thank you so much for letting me be your MC tonight. I've been so honored, and I hope that you all enjoyed your time. We also have refreshments out in the hallway if you all want to enjoy after the event is closed. So thank you for coming. Bye.